It's a real joy to be here with you every morning, but in particular on Wednesdays, it's our busiest day of the week when it comes to guests. And we speak with Tim frequently. He's a dab hand at this now, as they say. Tim's on with us most weeks. But what we're going to do over the next few weeks is to welcome other people who are part of the Compassion Ministry. Now, let me just tell you that Compassion UK are our official breakfast show sponsors. It's the breakfast show in association with Compassion UK. And we are so blessed to have them on because they're standing with us and we are standing with them. So this morning, it gives me great pleasure to welcome Janay. Good morning, Janay.
Good morning, Gareth. It's great to be here this morning.
Now, this is the first time that we've ever had somebody on the radio station who's actually been through the Compassion program. You're classed as a graduate, aren't you now?
Yes, I am through and through born and bred compassion.
And so obviously from the accent, you're not from Essex. You're from India. Is this right?
No, I'm actually from Essex, Gareth. I'm just joking. No, I am from India. Yes, I was born and brought up in a slum community in India.
Many people now wondering what a person who has an Indian accent but has lived in Essex for a long time would sound like. But anyway, so you were born and raised in India. Now, this is the great thing that Compassion do, where they offer people like you a future. So let's go right back, because by the looks of it, you're only about 16 years old anyway. So we don't have to go that far back. You're looking very, very youthful. So when were you born and where exactly in India were you born?
Sure. So I was born in the eastern part of India in a city called Calcutta. But I was born in a slum that was historically a refugee slum that came about from the partition of India many years ago. But it's a small slum community of about roughly 10,000 people living in that 1 square kilometer area. And what all the usual challenges of lack of basic source of livelihood. So, for example, there was 2 toilets for the entire community. You can imagine that meant children, men, women. We often have to use open drains and garbage areas as toilet. And what it meant was when it rained and our community would get flooded, there will be sewage and feces floating around, and diseases like malaria, dengue, diarrhea was quite rampant, and children and people would uh, suffer and die from these diseases because there was no way to access medical help, and not just challenges in terms of toilets, but there was no regular work. I remember as a child, my father would go out every day looking for jobs, and often he wouldn't find any, and that meant that day my family, my sister and I, we would go to bed hungry. So that feeling of intense hunger as a child is a very vivid memory in my mind. As a child, you look around, all you see is darkness. You see starvation, suffering, and no hope, because you feel there is no way out. This was your father's story. This is going to be your story, and this will be your children's story too. So I always say, poverty is not just lack of food and resources and material, but it's a lack. Is at core, it's lack of hope. Hope for a life that is different and empowered.
Do you know, this is difficult because as a person asking the questions, I have to try and imagine what it would be like for you growing up. And I'll be honest with you, I cannot imagine what that would be like because, praise God, I've never had to experience that. But
Yeah.
that doesn't mean that, you know, everybody is as blessed as us in the Western world are. But for
And
you,
that's the thing. When I first came to this country in the UK, I mean, it blew my mind to see the amazing difference in the two world, and this is why I love sharing about my story, because so much of the world is not how we see here on our doorstep. To give you an example, we have 2 or more toilets in our house. Most of our houses, but we didn't have any toilets practically to use when growing up. Think about the dignity that you lose as a human being for the lack of that one basic essential need. I mean, our houses is smaller than some of the bathrooms I've used here. 6 by 8 feet in area, a typical one-room house, which will be our living room, kitchen, bedroom, everything. You know, in intense summer, no electricity. You like sweating hot and struggling to sleep. In winter, it's freezing cold. Um, Water. I remember the tap used to run 2 hours in the morning every day, and all the kids and women and men, they would run with their bucket to fill it up, and that's your water for the day. You know, I love it that over here we can turn on the tap and water is flowing. We open the fridge, there is food to eat. Simple thing that we should be grateful for is such a scarcity in most of the world where there is extreme poverty.
And we do take it for granted. So, do you know, I've been to a music festival where there's probably about, I mean, I'm guessing there's maybe several hundred toilets in there to cater for about 100,000 people when you go to a big festival. And even they aren't something that you look forward to using. But for you, two toilets for basically a whole village, you've got children, you've got adults, you've got the elderly all using it. It doesn't bear thinking about. So let's just start off with that was where you were. What actually happened when you received, I guess, the communication that Compassion had found somebody who would sponsor you? It must have just been celebrations for the whole family.
Absolutely. I mean, try to imagine, view it from the lens of a parent. You know, as a child, I'm observing all these things as I'm growing up, and it's scaring me, and it's scaring me because death is so evident around you, suffering is so evident around you. But as a parent, as my father would struggle to even feed his children often and do it, even doing his best, the desperation of a parent not being able to provide for their children, and when they get sick, not be able to take them to the doctor and watch their children suffer and often die. It's an absolute desperation and lack of hope. And in the midst of that, you know, there's some people from a local church came to our community and told our families that we want to help you. We want to help your children get education and have food supplies and medical help. I mean, you're absolutely right. It was like a celebration. It was like God has turned his eyes on us, you know, and from no hope to some hope. And what happened was Compassion came and partnered with this local church, and that's how Compassion works with the local church, who knows the local people and knows the best way to support them. So they connected with this church and sponsored hundreds of children. I was one of the first one to be sponsored, but hundreds of children from my community got sponsored. What it meant was, the first thing that happened, they sent me to school, and I was the first child in my family and one of the first ones in my entire community to ever go to school. You know, one of my fondest memories as a child was teaching my parents how to write their names. And I'm sure it's the other way around here.
It's just I can't. So, do you know what? It's just like it's so hard to sort of understand what that must have felt like. Because do you know, my children, in my mind then, I was ticking off things going, my children have never had to go to bed hungry. They've never had to go to bed cold. Whenever they're ill, even if they've got the sniffles, we basically go to a drawer downstairs and we get medication for them. For your parents especially, it must have been such an absolute emotional roller coaster where they've got these children, they've got you and your siblings, and they're thinking, they're ill and I don't know what to do. I don't know what hope they've actually got. Will they ever have a job? Will they just potentially die of the illness that they've got? It must have just been awful.
I can't bear to imagine what it must be. And which is why I always say, you know, what Compassion in the local church did was not just come alongside me as a child, but they came alongside us as a family and told the parents, you're not alone, we are with you, and told the child that you are known, loved, and you're protected with in what God has given us. So education was such a huge thing for us, huge source of empowerment. But not, it didn't just stop at education. You know, we used to have food supplies when there were shortages. We used to have monthly hygiene supplies. I remember receiving my first hygiene pack with toothpaste and soap. Before that, we used to try to clean our teeth with burned ash. You know, you burn wood and the ash. We used to try and clean our teeth. But with the toothpaste, we even had a training session how to squeeze the tube from bottom up to make the most of it. I mean, it's a very simple thing, but those are things that's so vivid in my memory. You know, all the supplies. And I got malaria when I was a child. I had diarrhea when I was little. I almost died twice. But the fact that I'm here alive is a testament to what the church and Compassion did. You know, I was able to go to the hospital. My father took me to the hospital, and I got care, and I survived. And unfortunately, many children before me, when these provisions were not there, they didn't make it. And so our life really started to take a different direction, and we knew that a different future was possible. Often poverty and the injustice of poverty tells you change is not possible. This is how your life is going to be. You don't matter. No one cares. But we felt, no, our life did matter. There are people who do care for us.
Do you know, I could talk to you for absolute hours. If it was up to me, we would have you on until 10 o'clock. There's questions coming in from our listeners. So what we're going to do is to take a break, and then we'll be back with Janay in just a moment. But, you know, this is life-changing stuff that we're talking about here. You just heard Janay talking about how his life could have been. But thank you to his sponsors at Compassion UK. He's now in a completely different place. And we will actually talk about what he's up to right now and talk about his family and that change that he's seen. Go and have a visit of the website. Maybe you're not in a financial position to donate. That's fine, but maybe you are. If you are, then I hope this is the thing that tips you over the edge to actually donate. £28 per month is going to change a child's life. It's going to give them education. It's going to give them a future. CompassionUK.org. CompassionUK.org. Go and have a look over there. Read up on what the charity do, and you can see the children who actually need sponsoring. And we'll be back with Janay in just a moment. Do you know, we really should make a sort of, not an outtakes because nothing went wrong, but the conversations that we have off the radio whilst the songs are playing. I'm joined by Janay. Now, Janay is a graduate of Compassion UK, who are our official breakfast show sponsors. And lo and behold, Janay actually went to Manchester University. So when he asked, where are we based? And I said, Manchester, he went, oh yeah, I know it well. And then we, of course, branched out into Indian food and Indian cuisine. So just tell us, a good curry house in the UK, how does that compare to a proper Indian curry, Janay?
I mean, they are very good. I shouldn't rip them too much, but I do think some of the way they cook it is slightly tailored more towards appeasing mass crowd of England. So if you want the real Indian curry, you have to spend the money, make the effort to go to India. But they are pretty good. The best one I've come across is Akbar's. They've got 2-3 locations around the country, but I love their food. They're the best one I've tried.
Well, I'll tell you what, my friend, this is a promise. The next time you're in Manchester, I want you to send me an email and me and you will go out for an Indian meal and I'll pay for it. How does that sound?
Gareth, you're a kind man. I will take you up on that. Thank you very much.
So, Janay is a graduate from Compassion UK. Now, it's so interesting and some great questions coming through. And I want to ask this one. This one comes in from Rachel, and she says, can you ask Janay, please, that did his family ever doubt their faith when they were going through these difficult times? And that's a great question, isn't it? Because it must have been so hard for your parents and for you as well to actually see a loving God when you're going through such difficult times, when basically poverty is a thing that is affecting everything in your lives.
Yes, thank you, Rachel, for that question. I think it's a very good question, and I'm glad you asked it because I wanted to talk a bit about my faith at some point. When I was growing up, it's very difficult to not believe in good and evil. When you live in poverty, you see so much evil, so you know there is a God. But you see he's not present in your life as well because you're surrounded by injustice. I wouldn't say we were Christians. We believed in a God, but we felt the God has turned his face away, and we are not worthy, and we are in the midst of this hopeless environment. And what was amazing is when the people from the local church came in and wanted to support us and help us, and our parents, my father, I remember asking them, why are you doing this? We have never been cared for years, 50 years that the slum has been there. And they said, well, we want to do this because we follow Jesus, and this is what he calls us to do. He calls us to love our neighbor. And that was very striking for my family and for a lot of families, that so people who love and follow Jesus, they want to care for the poor, and that intrigued their mind. And few years down the line, many people came to faith in Jesus and started going to the church to learn more about this God who is for the poor, a God who says, I love you and I care for you, and who has suffered himself to know what we go through in our life. So my family actually became a Christian. I became a Christian as a teenager, and it all started with seeing how the local Christians lived. So I always say the gospel came to us in action, and later in words. But yeah, to answer your question, Rachel, at the moment you talk, whether we doubted our faith, we knew there was a God, but we felt like we were not worthy. We were not loved. We are the bottom of the society. But how people from the church came and cared for the children and for the family, it made us realize we are loved, known, and put our faith into Jesus.
And that love of Jesus can be shown by joining with Compassion UK. And that is what it's all about. I keep saying this, and it's so important that the work they do is life changing. CompassionUK.org. Head over to their website and you can see all the children who are looking for your support. And I've said this as well a few times. I can't scroll down too far because when I see all the children who need support, it breaks my heart. And if I could, I'd sponsor every single one of them. But we need to do our bit. Each and every one of us needs to do our bit. And we know it's difficult times for everybody. So, you know something? Do not feel guilty if you cannot support the radio station or if you can't support Compassion UK. But what you can do, which is free of charge and has so much power, is to pray for the organisation and the work that they're doing and this life-changing stuff that's happening. So now we find you're in the UK, going to curry restaurants and saying, well, they're not very good. But just tell us what you're up to at the moment. So you're in the UK. We mentioned that you went to Manchester University to do a master's degree. Janay, of 2022, what are you doing now?
Yeah, so just before I jump into what I'm doing now, just to give a little bit of what happened later on in my life. What Compassion does is help the child through school, and at the end of the schooling, they help them either with apprenticeship or going to university. Really, the focus is to equip the child to be able to support themselves and their family, and take them to that stage. And I was supported to go to university in India, and I studied business. I was always interested in how economically we can empower the poor to change their circumstances. And so I studied a lot about microfinancing and microcredit, and was doing some work with it in India, when I then got a private scholarship to do a master's program in Manchester. And that's how I ended up in the UK. And I'm so glad I ended up in Manchester, because I felt like it was the second best place to home that I could be. There's so many Asian food places there. So what I do now is I'm a huge advocate for supporting children and family in poverty. I've seen what has happened in my life, and more importantly, to bring Jesus. In my life, I've known you can have all the food, all the clothes, all the big houses and holidays in life, but if you don't have the hope of Jesus, nothing else matters. So at the end of the day, it's about bringing his eternal hope into your life. Do you know what? Some of my happiest memories of my child was in poverty, when we knew there was a God who loved us and is with us in this struggle. So hope of Jesus is the key for me. So that's what I do. My life is about bringing his hope through actions in any parts of the world I can. So I do three things. I advocate for compassion wherever I can. I want people to sponsor children. I know there are over 300 million children in the world in extreme poverty. We can't help everyone, but we can all support one child or two or three, and together then we can change their story. So that's what I do with my time. The other thing I do, I run a ministry called Pursuit that works in India at the moment. My wife and I started in 2016, and it focuses on children who don't have families, or children who are at the risk of, or children and young people at the risk of losing families. So we work with them through various programs to support them and ensure that child stays in the family. It's one of the best things that happened because of Compassion. I never got detached from my family, and that attachment gives you huge resilience to tackle the challenges of poverty. So I run a ministry called Pursuit that works with children and young people who don't have family or at the risk of losing their family. Give them various life skills, education, and support to really strengthen that family network and empowerment. And the third thing I do as a paid job for me is I work for the NHS. So I run different services in our local hospital, basically ensuring that patients get treated in time. So at the moment, we've got a huge bit of COVID recovery work to do, and we appreciate all the patience people have shown as we recover. as a healthcare system. I just want to say, coming from India, what an amazing organization NHS is, and what an amazing blessing it is to the people of this country.
Do you know what a guy you are? You're giving so much back. You're giving so much back to people in your own country of India and of course to us here in the UK. And it's an incredible thing. And this was all made possible because somebody gave £28 a month to become your
And
sponsor.
that's the amazing thing, Gareth. It's not about I can help one child, but it's about what I can partner with God to enable one life, and then the multiplication that comes from it. Everything I'm able to do is because Tom and Liz decided I want to make a sacrifice to and give it in God's hand. Really, £28. You can argue how far does it go, but I actually believe you partner with God when you're doing that, and He enables people. He brings around people to not just change one life but many lives through that, and that's my hope that my life will impact as many as possible, and Tom and Liz's sacrifice will continue for generations even after their time. And so yeah, I encourage people to, if you're able to, come alongside, even if it's one child, one family that you can support. You don't know what God can do through one life.
You mentioned Tom and Liz. They're the people who actually sponsored you. What's the relationship like with them now?
It's amazing. Like one of the bit I love about the compassion sponsorship model is the relational aspect of it. Investing to a child. I didn't know for a long time in my life that somebody was paying money for my school fees and this and that. I knew that there was somebody who was like our family's friend and would support us. But I knew more than anything else that when Tom and Liz would write letters to me, that they were thinking of me. They say they prayed for me. They would ask me about how the school went. They would always ask me about food because I love talking about food. I would talk about mango season and another curry that my mom has made. So it's that relational aspect that really made me feel known and loved and cared for. And that was an amazing sense of empowerment to have when you know that you are special in someone's eyes. And then obviously when I grew up, I realized the financial sacrifices they were making. But that relationship gave me a lot of impetus in life. I lost my father when I was a young boy. He passed away due to malaria. I remember going through all those difficult times, and I would say, I don't know whether I can continue to study or whether I need to come out of school and support my family. And I remember Tom always encouraged me to, persevere and trust God, and work hard in school. So that relationship was so pivotal in my life, which I find is one of the amazing things you can minister to a child and a family when you work through compassion, is that relationally through letters you can invest and hear back from the child. And even when the sponsorship stopped, those letters that I still have still resonates with me, still speaks volumes. And I would, so yeah, I just want to say a huge thank you if they're listening. And I'm very grateful for all the time they've taken to invest in me.
And you can invest in a child. Do you know, maybe it's a birthday, maybe it's an area, maybe it's a name that when you look at these children, it just rings something home to you and you go, oh, wow, that's the name of a distant relative. That was the name of my father. It's the name of my children right now. Just something like that, that maybe just makes you think, yeah, this is the child that we'd like to sponsor. £28 a month. And I'm sure Tom and Liz are so blessed to hear these stories of what you're doing now. We're joined by Janay from Compassion UK, and it's been wonderful to have you on. Thank you so much, Janay, for sharing. And a lot of people saying actually on the text, when you go out for the Indian, can you let us know? Because we'll also come. So maybe we can have a massive get together.
Yeah, maybe I need to do a curry critique show with you.
Wow, that would be fabulous. I love that. Right, I'll tell you what, I've got your email and we will communicate off the radio, and we will have Chef Janay on the way sometime after Christmas. And basically, do you know, I've never had a curry in the morning before. I'm not sure how I'd feel about that.
Well, you're not a fully Indian if you can't handle curry for breakfast. That's what differentiates you and me, Gareth.
So maybe I'll be converted to go out for an Indian breakfast rather than an Indian meal in the evening. Just before you go, you're also, so the many things you do, you're also doing some MCing at this Carols with Compassion, which sounds fabulous. Tell us about this.
That's right. Yeah, I'm so excited to be joining with Compassion. There's a live carols with Compassion in Woking. If you're in and around that area, or even if you have to travel, I tell you what, it's worth it. It's a great family, kids-friendly event where on 8th of December from 7 o'clock, carols with Compassion at Welcome Church. And if there's amazing talented artists like Noel Robinson, Steve McCloy, Philippa Hanna, Lucy Grimble, they're all coming in to do carols with Compassion. So you get free mince pies and mulled wine when you come in. Kids get a free present. But it's a great evening to really rejoice in the eternal hope that came to us in Jesus, and an amazing way to know during all the struggles and the challenges that we face at the moment, there is one that we can hold on to who gives us hope to go through not just this life, but for life in eternity. And also, yes, I would really look forward to seeing lots of you there, and maybe we can have a chat at the end about our conversation this morning.
CompassionUK.org is what you
Yes,
need to go
feel
to.
free to get your free ticket. You just need to go online and book your free ticket at compassionuk.org for the carol
So
service.
it is a free ticket, but you need to actually register for your free ticket, or you won't be getting any free ticket and you won't be even going through the door, sadly. So compassionuk.org is where you need to go to. A lot of excitement about what we've been speaking about, but also about this curry feature as well.
Yes.
I love the fact that our audience, they were thinking, yeah, great important stuff, sponsoring children, and then it's Indian food. Why don't we do a feature on that? Somebody's even said, actually, what about calling the feature Corée with Janay?
I like that. That makes me sound very posh.
Janay, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for spending a half an hour with us. And you know something, we've learned so much. And just think, in fact, one last question for you, okay, just before you go. How different would your life have been if you hadn't have had compassion?
You know what? That's a very good question. It's a question that is quite evocative for me, because sometimes when I'm like driving long distance to go to some venue, I'm sometimes thinking, I'm in the UK, I'm speaking at all these different churches. I'm able to support all these families in India. And there was a time in my life when I didn't know whether I would live to see early adulthood, or when my family didn't know if I was going to go past my childhood. So it really it scares me to think where I would have been, whether even I would have been alive or not, and if I do, where I would have been. And a lot of my not peers, but children before me, they ended up dying young or into drugs or crime. Poverty pushes you to some extremes just to make survival happen. So it really scares me to think, which is why I feel more grateful every time I think of it, that I'm glad that church was there, that Tom and Liz was there, that compassion was there, that is not my reality. My reality is now where I'm able to support my family, and I can do what I can to bring more support to children and families in similar circumstances.
Thank you very much, Janae. And you can do your bit by simply heading over to the Compassion website right now. It's compassionuk.org.